Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our presentation, When Faith Meets Coding, Integrating Coding in the Religion Classroom. My name is Michael Kandata. I am a K-12 STEM consultant in the Dufferin-Peel Catholic District School Board Program Department.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Busick, and I also work on the program team with Dufferin-Peel, and I'm the K-12 coordinator of technology-enabled learning. Michael and I are super excited that you're joining us today as we explore coding in the religion classroom. Now, you'll notice on your screen that we have included a QR code. That's for you to use if you would like to access a copy of this slide deck. So if you have a QR code reader, please go ahead and scan that now. No worries if you don't, that's okay. We've also included a link, a bit.ly link, and you can just jot that down and then you can access the slide deck at a later date. All right, so today we are going to talk about coding. We want to talk about how you can use coding with your students in the religious classroom to allow them an opportunity to communicate their learning and their understanding. So today we're going to talk to you about 5 things. We're going to talk about what is coding, and then we're going to talk about why coding. So why is coding important? And then we're going to spend a bit of time just looking at coding and how, by doing coding with our students, we're able to foster the Ontario Catholic School graduate expectations, as well as the global competencies. And then Michael and I are going to show you some great activities that you can try with your students to get them to start to use coding as a tool to demonstrate their learning. And then lastly, we're going to share some great coding support resources with you so that you have some support as you get started with coding in your classroom.
All right, so a good place to start is discussing what is coding. So coding, we can think of it as a process of writing instructions that a computer will understand, and computers understand programming language. So these instructions that we give a computer can be in a number of different programming languages, but they all follow a similar logic in that the code is read in a sequence and in a sequential order, usually from top to bottom. And the computer will read and follow those instructions in the order that we put it in. Today, we're going to explore a programming language called Blockly using the Scratch coding editor.
Fantastic. So now that we have an understanding of what coding is, it's important for us to think about why coding and why does coding matter. So when Michael and I were putting this together, we could have filled an entire page with all of the reasons why coding is so amazing, but we narrowed it down to 4 for the purpose of this presentation. So one of the reasons why coding is so important is because it allows our students to develop as creative, resilient, and holistic thinkers. And it does this because when students code, they actually become content creators. And through that content creation, our students have the opportunity to try something, to test it. If it doesn't work, to retest it, and to keep doing that, multiple iterations until they're able to actually solve the problem that they're trying to solve. Another thing that's amazing about coding is that while students code, they're actually developing a set of values and skills that help them to develop the Ontario Catholic School graduate expectations, as well as the global competencies. So if we think about the Ontario Catholic School, as we think about the Ontario Catholic School graduate expectations, we see our students having the opportunity to become critical thinkers. They are becoming lifelong learners. When we think about the global competencies, we start to see our students having the chance to become collaborative contributors, as well as lifelong self-directed learners.
Coding can also develop one of the Ontario Catholic graduate expectations, and that is becoming a responsible citizen. So as our students work towards embodying this expectation, coding can give them that opportunity to share their gifts in a way that will hopefully benefit society. That's what our ultimate goal will be. So we want to encourage the positive use of technology and not just simply sitting back and consuming something with technology. So for example, a student, as they learn coding, they might develop an app that translates and reads picture books in a variety of languages, making them more accessible. Another thing to consider is that coding has actually been cited as a tool that levels the equity playing field by allowing all students to use technology for creative engagement as members of their school community. It's a new language for all of us, and we are all entering it at the same point, but we can get a lot of value, and our students will get a lot of value out of doing coding. Today, we're going to focus on how we might use coding as a tool for students to communicate and demonstrate an understanding of their faith. We are accustomed to coding helping us develop a deeper understanding of the elements of STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and math. But hopefully today you can walk away and see how coding can be beneficial in other subject areas. Most specifically today would be religion.
So let's take a deeper look at how coding fosters the development of the Ontario Catholic School graduate expectations and the global competencies. As Catholic educators, we know that the relationship between learning and believing is fundamental in our Catholic schools. The Ontario Catholic School graduate expectations were developed to provide a framework to represent the distinctiveness and purpose of Catholic education in Ontario. Over time, our educators have begun to not only foster the development of the Ontario Catholic School graduate expectations, but they're also beginning to foster the development of the global competencies. Now, don't worry if you're not sure what the global competencies are. Global competencies are really a set of knowledge, skills, values, and behaviors that help to prepare our students for a complex and unpredictable future in our ever-changing world. Today, we know that for our students to be successful, they need to become lifelong learners in order to help them to understand issues of global interdependence, and most importantly, to help them to become active global citizens. So the global competencies and the Ontario Catholic School graduate expectations are beautifully aligned, and that allows us as Catholic educators to develop these distinctive set of graduate expectations while simultaneously fostering the development of the skills and values that our students will need to be successful as they work through life, work, and learning.
When we think about the integration of technology and instructional pedagogy, we need to consider the SAMR model. If you've heard the SAMR model before, this is probably just a quick little review. If you haven't, that's okay, because we're going to cover it just briefly. The SAMR model is a framework created by Dr. Ruben Quintadura that categorizes 4 different degrees of classroom technology integration. The letters SAMR, S-A-M-R, stand for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. We can think of the SAMR model as a spectrum. On one end, technology is used as a one-to-one replacement, a direct substitution for something that we would have done. So for example, writing a reflection in religion class. Instead of writing it by hand, a direct substitution would just be having students type it out in a word processor. On the other end of the spectrum, we have this redefinition, being able to do tasks that we would have never have envisioned before. So for example, we could have students code a scavenger hunt, and in that coding, in the scavenger hunt, as they find different objects and they've coded this, it can reveal, for example, the Beatitudes, something that maybe we wouldn't have never done before. So the SAMR framework can be a simple and effective way to assess how you incorporate technology into your instruction.
All right, so let's start to talk about some of those activities that we mentioned. So there are all kinds of different coding activities that you could use in the religion classroom. And Michael and I have kind of brainstormed a short list here of 6 different activities that you might want to try. So the first one we have is animate a virtue. And this is one that we're actually going to do with you today. So we're going to do a brief introduction with you in Scratch and kind of get you started on how you would help your students to animate a virtue. The second one, code a parable. This is really just about any content. So anything that you teach your students in religion, you could actually have them retell or do a story of that element, and that would be through coding. So they could actually code that content. So we just gave the example of code a parable. Reflection is next. We know religion, really, truly, our faith is a lot about reflection. So coding gives students an opportunity to reflect in creative, innovative, and engaging ways because they can do all kinds of different things. And there's lots of opportunities to meet those different learning styles that we know our students have. Create a game. This one's super fun. Our students love doing things like this, where they have a chance to create a game that shows understanding. So maybe they create a game that shows the gifts of the Holy Spirit, something along those lines. We also have the idea of stations of the cross. This is where students could actually animate the stations of the cross, and they could bring those to life. And they could include reflections there and their voice, and you could really get a sense of not only what the stations of the cross are, but also what they mean to the student. And then lastly, this is probably one of our favorites. Michael and I really like the idea of trying to move beyond the paper pencil, making the Advent wreath, and actually have students code an Advent wreath where it's interactive. So students would be able to turn the candle on and off, and they could also record their reflections around what each of the weeks in Advent mean to them, and how they're preparing for the coming of Christ. So, as I said, we were going to show you how to animate a virtue. So the task that you would give to your students is you would ask them, I want you to demonstrate for me what a particular virtue, so let's say it's the virtue of hope. So I'd like you to demonstrate for me what the virtue of hope means to you in your everyday life. And you're going to ask them to do this using Scratch, which is a coding editor. Now, typically, we would do this as a paper pencil task, maybe a written reflection or a poster or even a presentation. But the beautiful thing about using coding is that we're implementing the use of technology in a meaningful way, and it allows students to demonstrate their thinking and understanding of a task that meets different learning needs. It also would help your students to develop the global competencies and, of course, those Ontario Catholic School graduate expectations. So for students to animate a virtue, they could do things like move letters, animate characters. They could add sound, music, voice recordings, speech bubbles, images. So the list goes on. So what we thought we would do, just to give you an example before we actually show you how, is we created 2 samples of how to animate the virtue of hope, because we wanted to give you a sense of the types of things you might see your students do. So Michael's going to run those for you, and we're going to just watch them together so you can get a sense of the types of things that your students could do with coding. So here's our first example.
Hope is being optimistic and finding the good in every situation. Hope can be found in the Eucharist. If we let God into our lives by listening to Him, thanking Him, praying with Him, and building a relationship, we can find hope.
So that's our first example, and you can see all the different things that we were able to do and how much students can actually say through coding. And now we're going to show you our second example.
This one's similar, but a little bit different in that in the first example, the code was running and everything was following in a sequence. This one is a little bit more interactive, where you actually have to click on some of the letters to get things to go.
The virtue of hope helps me find happiness and open my heart in expectation of future blessings. It helps me to do the right thing and make good choices to help others.
All right, so that's our last example.
Yes, so we are going to show you how to do this now, how to get started with animating a virtue, but obviously just based on time, we can't show you everything. So we've included just below where it says sample activity, you'll see it says supporting resources. We have included links to 2 tutorials, one from CS First and one from Scratch, and these are called Animate and Name. So don't worry if you have no clue how to code. You could share these links with your students, have them go ahead and watch these great tutorial videos, and then once they have an understanding of how to do the code, you could apply the content and actually ask them to animate a virtue.
Lisa and I have also created a little table to show with the other activities that we came up with. And we aligned them with some of the tutorials in CS First and Scratch, which ones we thought would be best to help support those types of activities. So in the CS First ones, we could link directly to those tutorials. So you can just kind of click on those links and it'll take you right there. In Scratch, you can only link to the main tutorial page. So we've linked that at the top, and then you can look for the names of the tutorials to kind of help build those activities with your students. All right, so we are going to give this a try, and hopefully you can follow along. If not, that's okay, you can just watch. As Lisa said, we're just gonna get you into Scratch, kind of show you around, and maybe do a couple key things that you could show or share with your students. So I'm going to switch over to Scratch. In our slide deck, in case you get lost or you can't remember a step, we put those steps in there for you, so you can always go back and revisit it. To access Scratch, you will go to scratch.mit.edu. That's scratch.mit.edu. You can use any browser to access this, as it is a web-based application. And when you go to that link, you will enter Scratch's page. You don't need to sign in or create an account to use Scratch. You can get on by simply clicking create in the top left-hand corner. And you can start using Scratch. You can also save the file that you've been working on to your computer and then load it up later through Scratch. If you're interested in using Scratch as a regular tool in your instruction, then you can consider looking at creating accounts. Scratch has great resources for creating teacher accounts or educator accounts, and then how to build a classroom within Scratch, and then using student accounts in a safe and secure way. Please just check with your school boards though to make sure that Scratch is an approved application to use, but it is pretty safe, rock solid application for privacy and security, and a great tool for coding. So to get started for today, we're not going to create any accounts. We're just going to jump in and click create. And when you click create, it will load the Scratch editor. It will be a blank Scratch editor. Nothing will be there. You'll see like a green tutorial screen pop up. You can go in and view that on your own. It kind of shows all the introduction and basics to Scratch. For the purposes of today, we're just going to close it so that we can just kind of give you a general overview. Again, in our slide deck, we have like a table of contents and a little breakdown of what each area of the Scratch interface does. Today, we're just going to focus on a few of them, just in the interest of time. In the Scratch editor, you're going to notice on the left side a bunch of colors. These are the coding block categories. We'll look at looks and sound and events in this little session today. But when you click on those categories, you'll see that the coding blocks here, they will change to the whatever's in that category. And these are the blocks that you will be using to get your program to do something. In order to get something to happen, you're going to find a coding block that you would want to use. And the beauty about Blockly, and you'll notice that Scratch uses Blockly, and there's a number of other ones that use Blockly. The blocks may not be exactly the same, but they're very similar. It's written in English, and it's pretty straightforward, telling you exactly what is going to happen. So for example, in this look one, it says say, and then there's an input box where you can type what you want your character to say for a duration. It tells you exactly what it's going to do. So in order to use that, you can click on it and drag it into your programming area. That's the middle part, the blank part. If you want to see what that code will do, you can just click on it and you'll see on the stage over here that the code will run. If you want to add multiple coding blocks, and remember that Scratch will read from top to bottom, you can add multiple coding blocks. And if I just want to show this quickly, hello, goodbye, for 2 seconds, I attach them, and you notice that they're kind of like puzzle pieces. They kind of snap into place. So I would tap that to see what it's doing, and it runs my short little code over there. All right, so those are kind of the main like areas across your categories, your blocks, your programming area, and your stage. I'm just going to clear this because I'm going to get you started on an animate a virtue activity. To do that, to get started, we're likely going to need to add some sort of background. We don't want our sprites floating around in this white void. And we're not going to use the scratch cat today. Lisa and I, when we created our programs, we wanted the virtue name. We want to spell it out. So I'm going to delete the scratch cat. You'll see under the stage, there's the option to delete or remove sprites. So I'm going to clear that away. And I'm going to add a background in the bottom right-hand corner. So Scratch has a number of different backgrounds, a lot of different scenes and scenarios that you can set up your Scratch code to run on. When you find one that you like, you can just click on it and it will drop it in as your backdrop. Scratch also enables you to upload a backdrop from your computer. So if you find an image file with the proper usage rights, you can use that in Scratch as well. You can upload it from your computer. I like the stars, so I'm gonna use stars. Now I want to add my letters, my sprites. So to do that, right next to choose a backdrop, there's choose a sprite. So I'm gonna click on choose a sprite. And you will see that Scratch, again, just like the backdrops, they have a ton of different sprites to use. A lot of great characters, people, cartoons, props, animals. There's so much to choose from. You'll notice that if you mouse over a sprite and it begins to move, it's just showing you all the different costumes. And that's something that will be beneficial when you want to actually animate or move something and change it to make it look like it's actually doing something. For this particular activity though, we're gonna not use a sprite, we're gonna find those letters. So the letters are found at the very bottom of the page. They have 3 different types, these yellow ones, these blue ones, and then these a little bit fancier letters, but they have multiple different costumes. So you can find one that you would like. I'm just gonna click on the H to start hope, and it will drop it in on your screen. You can click and drag and move your sprite anywhere that you want to set it up. And when you're happy with it, you can click and leave it there. And then you can come over to your categories to start coding that sprite. We're going to show you how to code 2 things briefly, how to do the speech bubbles, which I kind of already did show you, and then how to add a sound. So to add a speech bubble for something, you would go to the looks and you have some choices here. Either you want your sprite to say something or think it with the little thought bubbles. So I like to use the say, the top one, for duration, because then I can time out how long I would think it would take for somebody to read what it is that I've written in there. And this way it will go away on its own when it's done. So I can, if I wanted to start writing something, I can type in that box by selecting it, and start writing the virtue of hope, and I could finish my reflection. I can change the duration as well. So say I want to make it last for 4 seconds. And I want to test it out, so I can click on it, and I see the virtue of hope, and it lasts up there for about 4 seconds, and then it goes away. So that's how you add a little speech bubble into your Scratch programming. Say I want to start it off with a speech bubble, but then I want to speak, I want to say something. So then I can go over to the sound. And you can choose from a number of different sounds. Scratch, again, just like the sprites and the backdrops, have some default sounds that you can choose from, but you can also record in Scratch, which is a fabulous tool. If you're looking at doing something with music, you can also add pitches and change volume and that kind of stuff. But we're just going to stick to playing a sound. So I'm going to play this sound until it's finished, and I want to record myself saying something. So I would click on record, allow my microphone to be used, and now I have this little recording studio. I click on record, and I can say something here, and it will capture that sound. And when I'm done, I hit stop. I can trim it if I want. And just, I had zoomed in today to be able to show you a little bit closer up. So I will save it. And now I have this recording labeled as recording 1 that I can use. And it dropped it in my sounds tab. To go back to my code, I just click on code. And here we are back in the coding platform. I can change this sound now to my recording 1. So when I play my code, when I run it, it's going to say the speech bubble, or it's going to record, and I can say something here and it will capture that sound. And so that was what I recorded. So that's how you can use the speech bubbles and the audio recording in an activity like Animated Virtue. Now, to run a code, we don't want to always click on this. And when we share the program, we want people that we're sharing it with to be able to run it. So you notice that there's like this green flag in the top. That's kind of like the run button in Scratch. In order to get it to do that, we need to go to the events. So we would go to events and we can say, when I click this green flag, I lock it in there, then this code will run. Notice how the events, they don't have anything at the top. It's like rounded because this is where you start. This is the beginning of your code. But what if I don't want it to be a flag? I can make it a little bit interactive. I can, choose it to be a different key on my keyboard. By pressing any one of those keys, it will start that code. Or if I click on that sprite, which is the one that we sampled in one of our demos, when I click on that H, then it's going to proceed with that code. And I can show you here. I can click on it, and now the Virtue of Hope, and it should play the board. And I can say something here, and it will capture that sound. All right. So I know that was a little bit of a whirlwind, and we're diving into a bunch of different things, but you can see, I hope you can see how powerful that the Scratch coding editor can be in doing something with these activities.
And not to worry, again, if you don't remember any of these things, that's why we've included those tutorials. So for Animate a Virtue, it would be the Animate a Name tutorial. And then of course, that table that we gave you for all of our other activity ideas, and then the tutorials that would correspond to help you do it with your students. All right, so as we wrap up, we wanted to share with you some coding resources that we think are really powerful. And these are ones that Michael and I use in our sessions with teachers all the time and in our in-class sessions with students. And they're fantastic because all of them are web-based. So your students can visit them using the website, and they can actually go there and they're full of different kinds of coding activities. So code.org provides free activities for students to learn about computer science in K-12. Then we have Scratch and CS First, and Michael and I have gone through those today. So you have a sense of what those are. And those are just filled with fun project ideas and tutorials that your students can use to learn to code. And then another one of our favorites is Make Code. And this one's great because it has not just block coding, but it also has text or line-based coding, which is fantastic for students that have been coding for a while and are looking to challenge themselves or do a little bit more. As Michael mentioned, your students can use these sites without creating an account. So that's great. They don't have to create an account in order to use the code. In our board, though, we have vetted all of these sites, and they are approved in our board. And so our students do create accounts because it allows them to save their projects in an easier way. So just remember to double check with your board before you ask your students to create accounts.
All right, and when you're viewing our slide deck, if you want to take a look at some of the resources that we use to put this together, they're here for you on our resource slide. All right, so on behalf of Lisa and myself, we really want to thank you for joining us as we explored coding and religion. We hope that you are leaving with a better understanding of why coding and why you would use coding in the religion classroom, and how coding can be used as a tool to demonstrate student learning and understanding. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us. Our emails are here in the slide deck. And you can also follow our team's Twitter account if you want to see what we're up to. We offer, tech tips and different project ideas and stuff like that through Twitter as well. And we put our Twitter handle on there. So thank you again, and bye everyone.
So thank you so much. Take care, stay safe, and thank you again for coming. Have a wonderful day. Take care.